Gender equity is a human right, and it is central to excellence in patient care. It lifts the economy and it makes our communities healthier and safer. This devastating pandemic has shone a spotlight on inequity, but has also given us a unique opportunity to put things right.
In this episode of Coda Zero, we discuss the issues of gendered inequity, how it impacts on healthcare providers and healthcare consumers, how it is compounded by racism, violence, and the pandemic. And we ask what each and every one of us can do, because each and every one of us has a role.
We're proud to collaborate with CommBank on this educational project about gender equity within medicine. We're excited to see the launch of CBA's The Next Chapter programme, addressing domestic and financial abuse.
I stand on Bunurong country. Chris is on Gadigal country, and our guests come from as far away as Powellton country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we stand, and we pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Wherever you are in the world, we ask that you take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which you stand.
Welcome to Coda Zero.
Welcome to Coda Zero.
We're going to move on to, last but not least, Dr. Lauren Powell. So, Lauren, the first question I have for you is, what does hate look like in our world today?
Well, first, thank you for the panel. Thank you for the excellent conversation already. I think the groundwork has really already been laid to sort of start to answer that question. And I feel like what hate looks like in the world today is pain. We see pain on multiple levels right now. We see pain globally as a result of COVID. We see pain globally as a result of the marginalization of women and girls globally. We see pain as a result of racism and colonization and generations of exploitation of people. I think at the core of it, hate looks like pain. I think about sort of my own experiences and kind of reflect on like, who does hate really hurt? I think hate has hurt me. So I have had experiences very similar to Amy in seeking healthcare and, going in vulnerable moments to seek the help of healthcare professionals who at those very moments really have your life in their hands. And to be questioned or to be scrutinized for my pain to not be taken seriously, or to be told or asked, can I afford an ambulance ride? Maybe I should just hold off on the pain that I'm feeling. And to know intrinsically that I was in danger, right? Hate, that is hate to me. The fact that you would question my pain, that you would think that somehow perhaps I can tolerate pain more than others. That is also a hallmark of white supremacy and ties all the way back to slavery. It ties back to the experiences of slaves being experimented on. A man who was heralded as being the father of gynecology, J. Marion Sims, really rose to fame, a white man rose to fame because of the many sort of techniques that we still use today in the GYN sort of specialty that he created using the bodies, exploiting the bodies of African women, of Black women, oftentimes doing surgery and procedures on them without using any anesthesia. No anesthesia, multiple times. It is said that he operated on one of his subjects more than 40 times with no anesthesia. And so when I am in pain and my pain is questioned, that heralds back to the treatment of an entire group of people as a commodity, as livestock. And so hate hurts me, and I think hate looks like pain. Hate also hurts my community. When I think about how COVID is impacting Black America right now, the impacts of COVID on African Americans, on Latinx communities, on communities of color, Indigenous communities here, it is terrible. It is so bad that we are not even counted. There are still challenges with transparency and data, with knowing how many cases there actually are in Black communities, with knowing how many deaths there actually have been in Black communities. And we know that COVID is complicated by underlying chronic conditions. And as a result of systems, not as a result of race, it is actually as a result of racism that Black people in America are more prone to disease, to hypertension, to underlying cardiology challenges. And that is a result of a system that does not equally distribute healthy food options, that does not equally distribute the opportunity to live in safe and clean housing, that does not equitably distribute the opportunity for education. And so all of that combined in this moment, along with the fact that there are so many African Americans, overwhelmingly women, in fact, who are on the front lines right now, not only in frontline healthcare worker positions, but on front lines in essential roles, working as cashiers in grocery stores, working as attendants in gas stations, working in positions that are hourly wage paying, do not come with health insurance benefits, does not pay enough to live on a reasonable salary, places these individuals back into cycles of poverty, and ultimately does not create the opportunity to live a healthy and stable and well life. And to me, that's also what hate looks like. The fact that you are stripping away the opportunity for me to live a good intended life, and a life that gives me the opportunity to achieve wellness. And finally, I think that hate hurts you. It hurts all of us. Hate hurts all of us, because what we're ultimately seeing right now in the midst of COVID and the overlap of racism and the overlap of the uprising post George Floyd, what we're ultimately seeing, so interestingly to me, is an illustration of population health. That is that my health is dependent on my neighbor's health. And if my neighbor isn't healthy, then I'm at risk too. Well, it's the same way when we think about racism. We think about these systems of oppression. If I'm not safe, neither are you, because we all have to live in this world together. And so what puts me at risk puts you at risk. If I am not safe, none of us are safe. And so ultimately, hate hurts all of us. I'll stop there for the moment.
What you touch on there is so fascinating and interesting, because we do see this dialogue of individualism when it comes to health, and it perpetuates the discussions around wellness and health, and it's a very privileged viewpoint in my perspective, and you really illustrate that nicely. So I guess, Lauren, what's the cure to this virus?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've had several sort of examples kind of sprinkled throughout this conversation already on things to do. One is that we have to recognize that this is a problem, right? Racism, systems of oppression are a problem. And I start with anti-Black racism in particular, because I actually think that is the foundation by which all other levels and sort of evolutions of hate sort of derive from. And so I think if we could eliminate anti-Black racism globally, I think all other forms of oppression would drop like dominoes. And so I think that first and foremost, it takes calling that out. It takes recognizing that, yes, we are in the year 2020. Yes, there have been some milestones by Black people and people of color, but that does not absolve this world of the fact that there is still a system that disproportionately pushes down an entire group of people who only want to have the opportunity to live the same life as everyone else. So I think first, calling it out. I think second is not ignoring the small ways that we allow racism to chip away at society every single day. We would call those microaggressions, right? And it's come up in a couple of different ways. Liz talked about jokes, right? And jokes in sort of a boardroom type setting, and how someone might chuckle along and not really call anything out. Amy talked about using racial slurs perhaps in a grant or in some sort of written academic product, right? It is those small digs. Those small digs give the okay or the nod to the fact that you can continue along with that behavior. It is those small drops of water that lead to a waterfall that creates these entire cascading moments of a police officer kneeling on a Black man's neck until he dies underneath his weight. And so it is so important, and I cannot overemphasize this enough. It is so important that we not sit back in any of our positions at any point in our lives and allow small insidious insults on race, on gender, on sexual identity. We cannot allow that, because that signals to people that additional egregious behaviors are okay. And third, I think that it's important for all of us to take an inventory of our privilege. I actually did an exercise when I was in graduate school where a mentor of mine made me really think about and pushed me to think about my levels of privilege. I actually was a little naive in thinking, I'm a Black woman in America. I don't know that I have any levels of privilege, but I do, right? I am able-bodied. I practice the sort of dominant religion here, Christianity. So there are other levels of privilege that all of us have. Even with marginalized identities, we still have privilege. And I think it's important for us to have to take inventory of that. And so that keeps me aware of my privilege. So when I'm in a conversation or in a room with people who are making remarks about perhaps a community, and I have privilege in that community, right? That holds me accountable again for calling that out as a microaggression.
It's interesting where you raise point to the microaggressions, and I mean really they're aggressions, and we see this in our education systems. The way that we design our simulations, that's my expertise, is we use stereotypes constantly. We create these courses that are about Indigenous health that are written by white people. And so we project these continued colonial views on the way that we educate our health professionals. And I think that's a whole other conversation that probably warrants a whole other panel to talk about that ongoing impact. We've got a question here from the audience, Lauren, that says, let's say we get a different septuagenarian president by the end of the year. How can we progress?
Well, first, let me say, Lord, hear our prayer. But second, I would say, it is important to realize that this is a system, right? And so changing the leadership is important, but it is not the end all be all, right? It is a step. But until we are challenging the way that these systems operate in the United States and also globally, until we are deconstructing and reconstructing something totally new, I don't think it's enough for us to sit back on our laurels. And so I am hopeful. I'm hopeful, praying, and also hopeful that we will have a change in leadership. I don't think it's a guarantee, and I don't think any of us Americans or anyone globally, I don't think that we can bank on that. And even so, that is not the root of the problem, right? That is sort of just the top layer of the challenge, but it is not ultimately the root of the problem.
Yes, great point. Each of you has given me so much to think about, and I'm feeling simultaneously inspired and challenged. Each of you has also thrown out a number of calls to action to our audience listening today. And I guess before we wrap up, I just want to throw to each of you to ask, what's one call to action that you would have our viewers go away and consider? We'll start with you, Kate.
All right. I think there's too much passivity. I think that everyone is too passive. They tend to sit in their own little bubble. They will think that they're a very good person, but they don't necessarily go out of their comfort zone to make a difference. So I would challenge everyone to get out of their comfort zone, to look at their privilege and see where they can help people who may not have as much privilege as them, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, even if people laugh at you or come back with a retort. It's really important that we all stand up for what is right. And this is true of both racism and sexism. I think we need to get out of our comfort zones and stop being passive.
Liz.
For me, I believe that human rights starts at home. So it's how we act in the family that's absolutely critical. So I would call on everyone today to do a number of things. One is to look at how they're acting in their own interactions with people, not just in the family, but outside. Are they modelling any racist behaviour? Are they modelling any sexist behaviour? Because that will be passed on to their children. And I would ask people to really teach their children about equality. I mean, people say, oh, well, what will be your biggest achievement, Liz? Well, it actually will be raising two children who fundamentally believe that equality is the only way. I mean, I think that's the greatest gift that I'll leave the world. And I think if every one of us did that, we would be, hopefully we'd be in a totally different situation. Let's remember, this is our opportunity. Now is the moment, because a lot of the old systems and structures have been broken. The mindsets are changing. We can either decide to go backwards, or we can create something which is inclusive of every one of us. And that's where I want to be.
Thank you, Liz. How about you, Amy?
Yeah, so I think reiterating what the other's saying, love it. I would say that too many people think of themselves as neutral and apolitical. Whatever you're doing, wherever you are in the medical profession, the media you consume, the books that you choose to keep in your home, it's all political. The research that you build your practice off, it's political. So I think I would say, you have so much power, so don't lose hope. These things that we're talking about can make you feel really drained and uncomfortable. And if you are privileged enough that these aren't going to be your experiences, you might be tempted to click off. But we don't want you to click off. We want you to remember that you have power, that you should have hope. And I would challenge you to go into your own homes tonight and see if you have anything in your home written by an Indigenous or a Black person. Not about by white people, but by an Indigenous or a Black person. If you've got kids, check your children's shelves. If you've got an office, go through your office shelves. If the only media, if the only literature, if the only studies that you are consuming are written by white people for white people, you are missing out on so much diversity, so much beauty, and so much important information that will only make your practice, wherever you are in the health field, much better. So I would challenge you to go and check, and then go and add to your bookshelves some Indigenous and Black-led literature.
Love it. And Lauren, what are your takeaways?
I think first and foremost, have hard conversations. I think know the difference between a discussion and a debate. A discussion being one in which you're hearing both sides, a debate being one in which you are vehemently defending your point of view. I think more of us need to be open to discussion, to understand where the pitfalls of misunderstanding lie, and less prone to debate. I also want to encourage, especially this audience, medical professionals often have, wealth and a lot of economic clout. It's important to not only support Black and Indigenous communities, sort of in practice, but also economically, right? Invest in businesses, shop in places that are owned by Black and Indigenous people and women, and especially if they're all three, right? The intersectional identity, and invest in economic development for these communities, right? It's not enough for us to just say, I have diverse friends, right? You need to actually put some investment in that. And that also helps redistribute power by redistributing wealth.
Thank you, Lauren. I'd like to take the time to thank each of our panellists today for contributing your valuable thoughts and experiences, and just acknowledge the labour that it does take to bring this to the table. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, CommBank, and I want to thank you, our viewers, for joining us for these challenging conversations. I hope you feel inspired to go out and influence change in your place of work. This has been Coda Zero.